When can schools silence student speech? Can a school, consistent with the First Amendment, forbid the wearing of black armbands in protest of the Vietnam War? Jamie, do you happen to know anyone who knows about one of the biggest Supreme Court cases in education?
You know what, Chris? I actually do. Yeah, I do. To mark Chalk and Gavel's 50th episode, we're doing a deep dive into student speech rights as we talk about the famous 1969 Supreme Court case, Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District. So Tinker set the standard for students' free speech rights in schools. And to help us explore this case, who better than Tinker herself? That's right, all you education law fans. Today, we are joined by Mary Beth Tinker. So
I am so excited for this. This is better than the Supreme Court calling us press.
Oh, this is 10 times better than that. This is we're peaking right now. This is it.
Hopefully hopefully our 50th episode isn't the top, but it's going to be hard to top this.
This is good. This is going to be hard to top. Welcome to Chalk and Gavel, everybody, where we explore how the law shapes education, one case at a time. I'm Jamie Cudlitz, a former middle school math teacher and principal.
And I'm Chris Thomas. I've been a high school English teacher and a school attorney. Now, Jamie and I are professors of educational leadership, bringing you the fascinating stories connecting the courtroom to the classroom.
Chalk and Gavel is for educational purposes only. While Chris and Jamie always try to provide accurate information, the law is like what I'm willing to eat. It's always changing. This podcast is not legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship, but they promised me it would be a lot of fun. For you. Can I get my candy now?
All right, Mary Beth. Thank you so much for joining us today on Chalk and Gavel.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm so glad to be here with you and Chris talking about all of these issues that are affecting students and teachers today.
Yeah, thank you. And we're gonna talk about a lot of those issues sort of through your experience and your history, your role in the Tinker case, which was obviously a huge landmark Supreme Court decision that had to do with student rights. But that was way back in the 1960s. Can you just real quickly tell us a little bit about what you've been up to since then, how those experiences with the case influenced you in the decades that followed? Give us a little Mary Beth Tinker background.
Yes, it was quite an experience, and it has been for the rest of my life. It really defined my life in many ways. The Tinker versus Des Moines case, which was decided in 1969, a very strong ruling for students' rights, and the Supreme Court added the word teachers to the ruling.
Right.
And so it affected teachers as well. Of course, there were limitations that the Supreme Court put on the rights of students, and we can talk about that. But from a personal point of view, it's been quite an experience, and it really started when I was 13 years old in 8th grade in Des Moines, Iowa, when a small group of us decided to wear black armbands to school to mourn for the dead in Vietnam that Christmas time, and also to support a Christmas truce that was called for by the North Vietnamese and then supported by Senator Robert Kennedy. So that was our message, to wear black armbands for that purpose. And the principals heard about our plan a few days beforehand, and so they had a hasty meeting and passed a rule against wearing black armbands.
Oh.
So then that was a moral dilemma, because there were about 50 students in the Des Moines schools who had decided to wear the black armbands and had signed up to do that. It was organized at one of the high schools, Roosevelt High School. But when the principals made that rule, it dropped down to about 10 kids who wore the black armbands, and 5 of us were suspended then. And it was very, nerve-wracking in many ways, especially as a very shy kid, which I was.
And you were an early teenager, right?
I was 13.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so I had many insecurities and shyness, but I had the idea in a way because of students taking action in 1963, Black students in Birmingham, Alabama. They protested against racial discrimination in the Birmingham Children's Crusade, and I was 10 years old when I saw them on the news, and they were so amazing and brave. 2,000 kids that year did that. And so then white supremacists in Birmingham bombed their headquarters, the 16th Street Baptist Church. And
right.
Yeah. Four little girls were murdered there in Birmingham, Cynthia, Addie Mae, Carol, and Denise. And someone came by a picnic that we were having in Des Moines and told us what had happened to these brave kids that we had seen on the news. So then the writer James Baldwin, and a leader in the civil rights movement, he was, and also another leader named Bayard Rustin, they said that we should wear black armbands that year all over the country to mourn for these little girls who had been murdered. So then when I was 11 years old, a few months later, that's when we wore black armbands for the first time. And that's kind of where it got the idea, because we had mourned the black armbands at memorial services for the Birmingham children.
Yeah, I've got to say, like, this is so fascinating to me. And one of the reasons, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, is that, we talk about so many cases on this show, and we are stuck with, for better or worse, the information that is presented in the court opinion, right? And we always say on the show that context is so important, and the circumstances are like getting into the players' heads is so difficult when all you're working off of is what's in the court opinion. And pretty much everything that Mary Beth just talked about right now, it's not in the opinion, Right.
And that's a lot more nuanced than, these students wore black armbands in protest of the Vietnam War. That's so much more context.
And what the other thing that's fascinating to me, Mary Beth, is that all of this, at least the start of your case, like you're talking about when you were, this all kind of started for you when you were about 10 or 11 years old, which is the early 1960s at this point, if my math is correct. Yes. And the start of the Tinker case was 1965. And I think that, one of the things that's important to point out, at least from a societal context kind of perspective, is in 1965, that was kind of like Mary Beth described, that was right in the middle of the civil rights movement. But as far as the Vietnam War was concerned, the anti-war sentiment was still in its kind of infancy at that point. It wasn't as widespread as it became by the late 1960s. So it's fascinating to me to hear where this came from. Like, it was very clear that you, as a young kid, were very, very conscious of these issues that were kind of plaguing American society in the early 1960s, even at such a young age. And that is fascinating to me.
Well, it was really because of the mighty times that we were living in, and a student called these times that we're living in now mighty times, and it's so true. Yeah. We're in mighty times again, but it was the times, and it was also my parents, and they believed that you should put your values into action. My father was a Methodist minister, and he had spoken up against racial discrimination at the local swimming pool in Atlantic, Iowa in 1957.
Wow.
Which was the year of the Little Rock Nine, and there was so much going on in those times. And so then my father lost his job at the small church where he was a preacher there when I was just 5 years old. And that was the way that we were raised, though, that you're supposed to put your values into action. And that's how we ended up in Des Moines, Iowa, because we had to move from Atlantic, Iowa then because of my father losing his job. So my parents were examples to us. And also, it's not like Mary Beth Tinker woke up one day and decided to wear a black armband. I was part of a group, as most of these actions usually are, involving a group, to involve a group. And so there was a group in Iowa called Iowans for Peace. And by that time, my family were involved with the Quakers. And my father even worked for the Quakers by that time, by 1965. And the action to wear the armbands was organized, as I said, at the high school. So there were some high school students that were really the leads in organizing the whole action. And it's just a fluke of history that I have been featured in many ways by reporters and, books and articles that feature the Tinker case. I think maybe because I was the youngest that was suspended, so it was appealing to reporters and others. There were actually 2 younger students who were involved. My little sister and my little brother also wore black armbands. One was in 5th grade, Hope, and one was in 2nd grade, Paul. But they weren't suspended. And they said, we want to speak up for peace too. And so my father was against it at first, but you see, kids are so persuasive. And so we said, but Dad, you've taught us to speak up for our conscience. And my brother John said, Dad, this is just a little black strip on our arm, and people are being killed in Vietnam. And you've taught us to speak up about these things, because my dad had some friends that were killed in World War II, and he took us to their gravesite. And it was very moving. And he said that if you don't speak up for your conscience, we could have the Nazis in charge. And so he had taught us that through the years. And so my brother John said, Dad, it's our conscience. And so
that's so good.
Kids can be very persuasive.
And using your dad's, you taught us this. You can't fault us now for following through with it. I love that. That's so good.
They were examples for us, and we had other examples, the Birmingham kids and so many others in that time period. But and when we got suspended, really a lot of people made my father the target of their anger.
Oh, really?
And so he paid a big price for all of this in the end also.
Oh, my goodness. This was a family thing, right? You all wore the black armbands together.
In a way, that's true. It really was a family, part of our lives. And so I speak about the case and encourage students to speak up for the things that they care about now and through the years, really to honor my parents, because I appreciate so much the way that I was raised to speak up and pay attention to what is going on in the world and in your community. And don't be silent. Speak up about those things.
Yeah, it's funny because even our last episode was the Don't Say Gun episode, number 49. That one is about student speech and advocacy. I mean, this is still such a pressing issue today.
Right.
But it got its footing close to whatever it was 50, 60 years ago now.
Right.
And
because Tinker's the high watermark of student speech rights. But, I've done a lot of research on student and teacher activism in the United States. And students and teachers have been protesting at their schools for as long as there have been schools at which to protest.
Yes.
You can trace student advocacy back to the butter rebellion at Harvard, where they got upset about the quality of the food. And they called for butter that stinketh not.
Yes. Better butter.
Better butter. Yeah.
It's so true. And I mean, you can look at, cases that happened that are even referred to. Clarence Thomas referred to a case, I think, from the 1700s when
the old Jack Seaver case.
Exactly. Where old Jack Seaver was called out by one of the students on his way home, and the kid got whipped with rawhide. And so Clarence Thomas brings up this case in his concurrence in the Bong Hits for Jesus case, the Moines v. Frederick case. But you could do a whole study about students speaking up about the status of their bathrooms and how they need to be taken care of better, and so many issues that students have been speaking of. I mean, and racial justice. The rights of students today in the United States built on the efforts of students speaking up for racial justice.
Right.
And even the most important line, really one of the most important things in the Tinker ruling, that students can have their free speech rights unless they do not substantially disrupt school. That came directly from students speaking up for voting rights in Mississippi.
Right.
In
Yeah.
1964, and speaking up against the murder of 3 civil rights workers, Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, by white supremacists in 1964. And that was an effort of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which started in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1960, the same year as the Greensboro sit-ins. So North Carolina had a big part to play in the development of students' rights.
That's amazing. Yeah, because that's because at this point, like, there's not a lot of case law around student rights. So the case I think you're mentioning is Burnside versus Byers, which was a Fifth Circuit case in the 1960s about like the wearing of freedom buttons. And so like that one, and that's where the language about substantial disruption that ends up in the Tinker decision, that's where that came from. So that's a really cool connection between the civil rights movement, the student rights movement, and the anti-Vietnam movement as well. Like all of those things are happening at the same time in the 1960s, and you're all learning from each other and being inspired by each other. Like those connections are so like, that's such fascinating connections between those two things.
That's the context, right? Like that's the context that you don't get such a great sense of from the court opinion, but that's what's going on right now. So you mentioned the principal got word that there were about 50 people or so who were going to do this, and the principal. Do you have any idea how the principal found out about that? Or
yes, it was from the school newspaper.
Oh,
because the
nice! You guys were organizing.
One of the students wrote an article for the school newspaper, and I don't know if it was Ross Peterson, Bruce Clark. There were a few students there. And when I went back for the 50th anniversary to celebrate the ruling, we were in Roosevelt High School library and looked at copies of the newspaper. The article wasn't there because it had been censored, apparently, because it wasn't in those issues. But apparently the principal had prior review. And so that's how the principals heard about it. And then it came out in the Des Moines Register. Thanks to the Des Moines Register, which has done really great work around this case, they put an article there saying that they had found the principal's meeting and that the ruling was to stand, that students would be asked to remove their black armband if they wore one to the schools, and if they did not, they would be suspended.
Wow. Okay. So, and that prior restraint on the newspaper is 20 years before Hazelwood.
Yeah,
which is the one that said that school officials do have the authority to do that as long as it's reasonable.
Hazelwood, 1988. That was probably the most damaging Supreme Court case having to do with students' rights in public schools. After our case, there were really 5 cases that had to do with students' rights in the public schools. But that was in 1988. I'd say that was probably the most damaging one.
Well, it would be 50 years until another student won at the Supreme Court on a speech case after Tinker. So, Are you thinking of Mahanoy? Brandy Levy. Brandy Levy in the Mahanoy case, where Brandy Levy in Pennsylvania basically cursed her cheerleading program on Snapchat. And all of these cases that I'm talking about since ours, including ours, were ACLU cases, the American Civil Liberties Union. The ACLU goes to the Supreme Court more than any organization in the United States. So the Mahanoy case, that was an ACLU case also in 2021, when Brandy Levy won at every level at the district, the appeals, and the Supreme Court. The only justice who voted against her was Clarence Thomas. And that was a victory for students' rights in 2021.
Yeah, we covered that one in, I don't know, that was like episode 2 or 3,
I think.
Something like that. And so we've done a few of we haven't done all of the classic student speech cases. We've done the Mahanoy case. We've done Bong Hits for Jesus. I think we did that for our 25th episode.
That was our 25th or our 1 year. I forget exactly what it was.
Yeah, something around there. Yeah, so like there have been some of these classic cases, but it really all started with yours. And
right. And when all this was going down, like we mentioned that Burnside case in 1965, 66, like when you were doing all of this in 1965, like what did you know about student rights? And like, did you have any idea about like kind of the legal protections or like whether or not what you were doing was legally protected?
No, I knew nothing about any of this. And there were actually 2 cases before ours, one in 1943, I think in 1945, Go Bidas, and then West Virginia versus Barnett.
Yeah.
But those, that was kind of interesting, those 2 cases, because one reversed the first one and said that students do have the right not to salute the American flag in Barnett. Right. But regardless, I didn't know about any of that. Our lawyer apparently did know about the Burnside case that was unfolding in Mississippi when we were suspended. But I mean, I barely knew about the First Amendment, about the rights of free speech, free press, the right to assemble, the right to petition, the right to your own religion. I mean, I was going through school as an ordinary kid in many ways, concerned about, whether I was going to go roller skating with my friend Connie that weekend and who I was going to talk to in algebra class and things like that.
Right. And that makes it even more incredible because you're seeing all these examples of other people doing similar things, and then like to have the confidence, or I don't know if confidence isn't even the right word, but like to go through it without knowing kind of the like, or even having an answer about all of the like kind of legal implications of all of this. Like, I think that just speaks so much to like what it is you all were doing. Yeah.
I think we were driven, and students ask often as I speak with students around the country, what motivated you? And I think it was, well, first of all, having examples of other people who speak up about things, that makes a big difference. And that's why I want to be an example for other students, but also a sense of fairness. Young people have a sense of fairness, and we just thought this was not fair. We didn't do anything to hurt anyone. We were just wearing a little black cloth on our arms.
Do you have it?
This. No, this is just this is a sort of a souvenir one that we that was cool. But that's all we were doing. We didn't hurt anyone. And remember, the high school boys, they could be drafted and sent to Vietnam when they graduated, and they were being told that they could not wear a little black cloth on their arm saying how they felt about that war. Wow. So we just felt like this is not fair.
Right.
And, there's always some adult around to say, life's not fair, get used to it. And I hate that, because life should be fair.
Right.
And so that's what I tell students, honor your sense of fairness, because life should be fair. That's what justice is about. And that's what our country is supposed to be about, justice and equality. And young people are very good at seeing when that's not happening and then wanting to take us there towards our ideals.
But that dialogue that is generated by people pushing for that kind of fairness and whatever, the dialogue itself is critical. And if we squash that dialogue, then all bets are off, right? Like it's
exactly. I know. We can't just censor things when they're controversial. And Tinker versus Des Moines is about controversy, and that we have to respect and admit controversy into our lives and into our schools. And the decision, which was written by Justice Abe Fortas, it says right in it, some things we hear about are going to make us uncomfortable. But that's a price we have to pay for education and for democracy. And if we're not willing to be uncomfortable, we won't have democracy. Yes, we can talk about things, and we should, with respect for each other. But the answer isn't to just censor these controversial topics.
Right.
Which is really fascinating in light of everything that's going on these days.
Very true. In interesting times or weighty times, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's I one of the things I want to sort of get into, we're kind of at the point where the principal finds out about this, right? And says that you're going to be suspended. So of the 50 students who were planning to do this, all of a sudden that dropped down to 10. I mean, I can understand why. Like, you know what? We've got we would rather not be suspended and have this on our record and whatever. So that drops down to 10. You guys go in there, you wear your armbands, you get sent home. You don't come back until after New Year's when your planned protest was supposed to be done anyway, right? And what happened then? Like, so did you go to school wearing these armbands? Who came up to you? Did they ask you to remove them? Or like what happened?
The funny thing is, when I went to school, I went through the morning classes, no problem. Some kids at lunch teased me. Some boys said, I want an armband for Christmas. And I ignored them. And then I got to my math class, Mr. Moberly's class, which I loved math. And he was standing outside the door with a pink slip to send me to the office. So I went down to the office and I was so scared and nervous, and Mr. Willitson, the vice principal, was there, and I sat down and he said, now, Mary Beth, that's against the rules. So take off that armband. So I looked around the room and I looked at him and I said, okay, Mr. Willitson. And I took off the armband. So I shouldn't even really have been suspended.
Oh.
But I learned a very important lesson that day, which I love passing along to students today, which is that you really don't need a whole lot of courage. You don't have to be the most courageous person in the world. You know, you don't have to be Rosa Parks. You can be you. You can be scared, nervous, tense. You probably will be when you speak up about something you care about. And that's how I was. But you'd be amazed what a difference you can make with just your little bit of courage.
Right.
Because too many students think that they have to be the hero of the world, or they better not say anything. And that's not true.
So you took the armband off when you were asked to take it off, and they still suspended you?
Yes. That's the great irony of the whole life, story for me, because I wasn't even really supposed to be suspended, according to the rule.
Yeah.
But, that happens in schools right now today all the time. Students don't know. I mean, administrators don't really know the law, don't really know, the rule if it's constitutional. A group of school board attorneys told me recently, well, these cases and everything are great, but what happens is the school boards and the legislatures, they don't really care or know the Constitution or the laws or what will hold up. They just pass this stuff and see what happens. And then it takes a person challenging it.
Right. And that's why we do Chalk and Gavel.
Exactly.
And I'm so glad you do. It's so valuable.
Oh, thank you.
So,
follow-up question about your siblings. So you said your two younger siblings wore the armband and didn't get suspended. Was there like a reason for that? Or like, is it just like they were too young to be held accountable?
I've never seen the actual rule, but what I understand is that it covered the middle school and the high school, but it didn't really affect the elementary schools.
Okay.
Because it was the high school principals who made the rule. But we did go back to the elementary schools of Hope and Paul for the 50th anniversary. And we had big events in the gym with all the fifth graders. And there was a teacher there that had been there the day that Hope wore the armband.
Wow.
And she had been out on the playground, and some kids were teasing Hope. And this teacher, Linda Ordway, she came over and said, now kids, Hope has a right to her feelings about this. And so Linda Ordway came back 50 years later, and she was at the school, Madison Elementary School.
That's amazing.
To celebrate 50 years.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Yeah. Because I think, so the reason that the rule got put into place, at least according to the court, is because the principals were worried about like the impact on other students. Because at this point, like you said, Mary Beth, these students were of an age where some of them could be drafted, some of them had been. There were folks in the community who had died in the conflict. And like, I think there was a concern about like disruption or about like, the potential like psychological effect that this would have on other students. Is that kind of like why the rule came about?
That was their reasoning. There was a boy who had been killed in the community, and the principals were afraid that it would, be very controversial. I mean, the strange thing also is that they allowed black armbands if you were sad about the football game. You could wear a black armband. But but speaking up about war, no, that's not for you kids to think about or talk about, I guess. And that's why it's a youth rights case.
Right.
Because it's up to the youth what subject they want to bring up and what they want to, express themselves about. There was a case in New Mexico where students were wearing red armbands to protest abortion. And the principal said, they could, well, no, that wasn't in New Mexico. I'm sorry. It was on the East Coast somewhere. But the students, it's up to them what subject they want to, bring up. The one in New Mexico I'm thinking of is where students wore armbands to protest their dress code.
Yeah.
And it actually became an ACLU case because they said, no, what about Tinker? We were supposed to be able to express ourselves and wear these armbands. And the principal said, well, in Tinker, they were talking about something important.
Oh.
War. But you're just talking about your dress code.
Oh,
and
no.
So the students, of course, prevailed. That was another ACLU case. I think it's called Watson Chapel. But the students won that because it's up to the student what issue they want to express themselves about. That's
ask a teenager what's more important to them and like how they dress and present themselves. Like that's everything.
That's everything.
That might be the most important thing that they want to talk about. And I always encourage students, whatever issue it is that you want to bring up and talk about, that's like good. Mm-hmm. You should. Why not?
Right. Yeah.
Do it with respect and
Right. Yeah. And those little moments of courage can lead to something, absolutely monumental. Because
good practice. And a lot of adults, are lacking in that skill. We see that today. Too many adults are caving and afraid to speak up about the things they care about. Really, I think the biggest danger to free speech is self-censorship.
Yeah. And we see that chilling effect a lot.
Yeah, you learn it when you're young too often.
Exactly.
Yeah, and young people are have been at the forefront of so many of these social movements. Right. Like the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, students have been a key piece of this. So
they really have. And I've come to realize as a nurse, I'm a retired family practice nurse, and I have a degree in public health also. So I think of it in terms of health and in terms of youth development, their developmental stages. And as teenagers, young people are particularly geared to want to express themselves. And some of it is because of the dopamine in their brains. Not dopamine, where they're more willing to take risks. And I mean, this can be a dangerous thing. I mean, I was a trauma nurse with adolescents also. So if you're riding your skateboard in traffic, that could be a bad thing. But as far as speaking up about things and not being corrupted, young people are very good, about that. And they see things that they want to speak up about. I think a boy named Trevor in Philadelphia, he was walking home one night and he saw homeless people laying on the street. And he said to his parents, what's all that? What's going on here? And his parents said, oh, yeah, honey, that's how we do things. We've got a lot of people that don't have anywhere to live in our society. And Trevor's like, what? What are you talking about?
Right.
And that's the strength of young people. They see things. It's like a little girl in Ohio. She said to me, well, that's because we're fresher.
Right. You don't take anything for granted.
Exactly. You're fresher. And that's the strength of young people. So if we censor young people, it hurts not only them, because it's good for their health to speak up for things. It's good for their physical health, mental health, social health, even their spiritual health. Mm-hmm. There's like all of it.
So and it's good for society.
It's good for the society. A society that listens to its children and teenagers and respects them and its youth is a stronger society. So if we censor young people, we're going to be only hurting the larger society because, they have great ideas and they see things that maybe adults haven't seen.
Totally. So you said earlier that you had very little awareness of the legal landscape that was sort of evolving at the time that you were going through your protests and and activism and everything. So you get suspended for, even though you did exactly what they asked you to do and you took off the armband, you get suspended. What happened then? Whose idea was it to say, you know what, this is something we're going to now fight legally?
Looking at letters and correspondence that I've found now from the past, I've found out that my father actually contacted the ACLU before we wore the armbands to see if they might be interested in helping us in case there was trouble.
Oh, wow.
And so
smart.
There was a woman in the Iowa ACLU, her name is Louise Noun, and she really made it her mission to stand by us, for the ACLU to stand by us. And then our lawyer, he was a law student at Drake University, and someone from the Des Moines Register was giving a speech at Drake Law School and was talking about this case and asked if any of the law students would like to help work on it or be interested in it. And because this reporter for the Des Moines Register was also involved with the Iowa ACLU, apparently. And so anyway, that's how Dan Johnston got involved in the case, our wonderful young lawyer who graduated from Drake Law School and then did such a great job of defending us, not only legally, but also just personally. Because by that time, we were traumatized in some ways by the adults, some of the adults in the community. It wasn't students who bullied us and harassed us so much. It was some of the adults in the community. Like a woman called on the phone and said, "Is this Mary Beth?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I'm going to kill you."
Wow.
And they threw red paint at our house. And some people threatened to bomb our house on Christmas Eve that year.
Wow.
And we were called communists all the time. And my mom would always say, "We're not communists, we're Methodists." It really grew out of our faith belief for us. There were other students that were involved. And there were 5 students involved that were suspended. 10 students wore armbands, 5 were suspended. They had their own reasons for wearing the black armbands. One of them, Bruce Clark, talked about his just being so much against the Vietnam War, and he knew more about the war. So, there were various reasons for people doing it, but for me, it really came out of faith. My upbringing, that you're supposed to speak up for peace and against war, and that these people were being killed and injured, and it was horrific. It was a war of atrocity, and we were seeing it on the news every day. People like Walter Cronkite were reporting on it.
Right.
But these things, I was taught, we can't just censor them. We have to talk about them and come to some, answers and move forward and progress.
Yeah, we have to have the courage to have the conversations. Yeah. And I think you've talked about a couple different kinds of courage, because you've talked about courage about not only kind of like speaking for your convictions, but also like the courage of bringing a lawsuit like this with the community pushback that it sounds like you got. Like you mentioned at the top that like this case has kind of shaped your life. Like that has to be such a massive like influence or impact for, trying to push this and push your rights and to affirm those rights.
Yeah, legally at 14 years old.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, because the biggest challenge, I think, also was not just going through the case, and that was challenging enough, especially when I got into, 9th, 10th grade, and I was dealing with various adolescent issues. But after we won the case, I was in 11th grade, and it was February of 1969, when the Supreme Court ruled in a very strong ruling by 7-2. And I have my favorite parts of the ruling. One of them is that students are persons under our Constitution.
Right.
Schools should not be enclaves of totalitarianism.
Right, which is a direct reference to Barnett, that 1943 case about the flag salute. Yeah.
And some of it is pulled from there. But so, after we won the case, then it was really a challenge because I was still a very shy kid. And reporters would, want to talk to me in interviews and things like this. And I was so nervous and shy. And I thought, now what am I supposed to do with this? But it's really a challenge that all of us have. What are we supposed to do with our skills, our talents, our interests, our passions? to try to make a contribution. And so I had no idea that this case was going to be so important, not only to me, but to young people and teachers and others around the country. One of the first times I realized what a big deal it was when I was in nursing school and the case was in my nursing textbook.
Oh my God.
I was studying along, and I think that's when it really hit me. Wow, this must be a little bit bigger than I thought. And that's when I learned that it's about youth rights. It's about children's rights. I mean, it's really almost it is an international issue, the rights of young people. And there's the Convention on the Rights of Children in the United Nations. And I started tying it up to other rights that children need, fair housing and food and good schools. And besides the legal rights that students have to express themselves, what are they expressing themselves about? A lot of times it's about these other issues that they really care about.
Yeah. And I think that it's a good opportunity to kind of step back at this point and say, because you mentioned it was a 7-2 decision at the Supreme Court, this is a good opportunity to say why this was such a powerful, pivotal, sort of landmark decision. And it's because everything that we're talking about right now was essentially affirmed for the first time by the Supreme Court. That the whole reason why Tinker is such a huge case is because the court basically said, you know what? All of that is legitimate. Like you can't stifle student speech except under a few conditions. But like what they were doing, what Mary Beth and her siblings and friends, what they were doing at that time, they were just advocating for something that they believed in. And it wasn't disruptive. It wasn't violating the rights of others. And as long as you meet those conditions kind of thing, schools, you can't do what you did in Mary Beth's case. Right?
Right.
And that was a huge, huge moment.
Right. Yeah. It was a sea change, or maybe not a sea change, but it was like the first time that this got formally recognized. Because Mary Beth, you were talking about some of your favorite passages from the opinion. And, one of my favorite passages is the sentence that says it can hardly be argued that students and teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. And that at the schoolhouse gate is so evocative. And that is such a famous sentence. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, it includes teachers in this as well. And so much case law has come from that one little sentence just saying, look, students have rights too, for all of the reasons we've talked about. Their voices matter and schools respect that.
Exactly. It has to do with the idea of respecting young people. Young people are a group that have been and still are discriminated against in our society. And I mean, you can just look at one indicator as health, professionals and others. We look at one thing, which is the infant mortality rate. And also what age group is most likely to live in poverty. That's children and teenagers. In the way we have our society set up, it's not true in every society. And it's not because kids don't work. It's because as soon as their parents have them, they are more likely to live in poverty. So when I think about, these rights of young people, I think about these things and how young people have been discriminated against and still are in many ways. I mean, the number one prevention for child abuse is Head Start. I mean, preschool education, and Head Start is a big part of that. As it turns out, preschool itself would be the most important intervention we could do to prevent child abuse. So right now today, we're seeing Head Start being cut back. We just saw an important ruling that an opinion that undocumented kids should not be allowed into Head Start. The offices have been closed in many locales. And so, when I look at kids' rights, I have to think also of the larger picture of what really affects kids. And it is poverty, and it's, healthy air, clean water. And as I started, being a nurse, I was taking care of kids or paying the price for the policies of adults.
Right.
They were drinking polluted. I've been to schools where all the water faucets are taped off.
Wow.
Because there's too much lead in the water.
Right.
Kids. I take care of kids who are having severe asthma attacks and end up even in the ICU. Why? Because certain companies are not following the pollution standards. And right now, we're seeing these standards have just been weakened.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 members of the product safety board were just fired. So product safety, that's going to hurt children and teenagers. And,
Right.
We could get into the environmental issues, the lawsuits against the EPA by the Children's Trust Fund, kids saying, wait a minute, adults, we're going to sue you because you're not taking care of our environment, and we're the ones that are going to pay for that. And
Right.
they won a case in Montana not too long ago. So I kind of see the bigger picture when we talk about kids' rights and the law.
Sure. Yeah, because everything you've mentioned are situations or circumstances that uniquely impact kids and young people in unique ways that only they can tell us about their experiences with. And that's one of the things that I often argue with student rights is like, they not only are they impacted by policies in unique ways, but they're also the only people who can tell us that. And if we silence them, then we don't have that part of the conversation.
That's so true. And kids can advocate for themselves very effectively oftentimes. And today we're talking about the K to 12 age group. We could talk about university students as well. And there are all kinds of issues, as we know there. But in the K to 12, I'm thinking of some students in Virginia. Their band program was cut off because it was in Fairfax County. They said they didn't have enough money for a band. And of course, we're seeing that right now today, arts programs, music programs being cut off. Oh, we don't have enough money for that. But so the kids went to the county council with their empty clarinet cases and their empty saxophone cases. And they're like, it was quoted in the front page of the newspaper, without our band program, we can't play the music in our hearts. And they got their band program back.
Yeah.
So
as a former band nerd, I appreciate that.
Oh, you also? That could have been you.
Very well could have, yeah.
You might have had to stand up for your band program, but it's true that when kids do that, it can be powerful.
Yeah, it absolutely can be powerful. And like to kind of think about the case itself in context, like we mentioned, it was a 7-2 decision. And, we've kind of articulated all of the like arguments for student speech and, recognizing these rights and like, the justifications for kind of robust protections of these rights. It was a 7-2 decision. So like there's obviously 2 justices on the other side. And one of the things I find really interesting about the opinion itself is like the way it frames this issue. So it frames the issue as like student expression versus school authority. Mm-hmm. And the argument kind of was essentially like, if we recognize student rights, that undermines school authority and no one will be able to learn anything. And for me, that kind of that's an oversimplification because I see educational benefits on both sides. Like there's an educational benefit in expressing yourself, in practicing your rights and in developing as a citizen. Like that is educational. And for me, that's a big part of public education. But it's interesting to see the court kind of pit those 2 things against each other.
I think wise administrators realize that their authority doesn't come from censoring students and using their power against students. Because I've met so many principals and spoken with so many graduate schools of education to students who want to become teachers, who want to become principals and be in leadership. And I mean, you can feel when you walk into a school, one that values students and respects their voices versus one that is censoring the students and the students feel like they cannot speak up about things that they care about. And so I think it's really better to work with the students. Like a principal was telling me recently, we have a problem with TikTok. We don't know what to do. Students are and the cell phone issue. And I'm always saying, well, have you talked to the students and presented this as a problem that we need to deal with? And the same thing with cell phones. I think social media and cell phones are not so good for kids' health. The more I research and learn about it as a nurse, I warn students, don't be on your phones too much. It's really bad for your health, as it turns out, in a variety of ways, not to mention, one of them is sleep. But regardless, I still think students should be involved in the solution. What can we do about this? Here's the problem. Let's see what your ideas are to solve the problem. And I think that makes for a stronger school.
Right.
Right. So it's not an either or kind of thing, right? Like there's a way to accomplish both.
Exactly.
So there was a dissent and I think either a concurrence or a dissent. I can't remember if they were both dissents or not, but like, I think it was it Justice Black? I've got the quote right here. He said he dissented because he wanted to, quote, disclaim any purpose on my part to hold that the federal constitution compels the teachers, parents, and elected school officials to surrender control of the American public school system to public school students.
Yes, I
that's
know.
a pretty inflammatory sentence.
I know he predicted all kinds of, hell breaking loose in schools if the students were victorious in this case. And I remember I was speaking to a 6th grade student not too long ago. She was doing her National History Day project on this case. And she said to me, what was with Justice Black? And I said, wow, you know more about this case than many law students. And National History Day is really great for exploring this. Another 7th grader just won a big National History Day award for his documentary on banned books and the Pico case.
Oh, great. Yeah.
From Long Island. But National History Day, 500,000 students get involved in that, and the money for it has just been cut. So I speak to lots of students every year who are doing various projects about, involving National History Day. So I told these students in Iowa, they wanted to be teachers, and they were doing theirs on Tinker. And I said, well, why don't you tie it up to some issue today that you care about? Because they said, we love National History Day. So I said, why don't you tie it up to what's going on with National History Day and the cuts in the money for National History Day? So they said they did that, and they also won an award there. But I think they ended up having a petition against cuts in National History Day. But I do think students, can tie up these lessons from the past and these cases, and teachers as well, to today, because a lot of times it's comfortable to sort of look at things in the past and think, wasn't that great? But then we have to also make it relevant to today.
I absolutely agree. And on that note, making this relevant to today, we've got a lot of stuff going on.
And a lot of stuff that has happened since 1969.
Totally. Like we mentioned, like those, the other major speech cases, Bethel versus Frazier was one. Hazelwood, we talked about before, the student newspaper case. Morse versus Frederick, we talked about in our 1-year anniversary. We talked about the Mahanoy case. There was also recently the LM versus Town of Middleborough case that was denied cert by the Supreme Court, which means they're not going to take up that case. And that was the case about the student who was banned from wearing a shirt that said there are only 2 genders due to, and the court said, due to concerns about disruption and bullying and harassment, that this student cannot wear that shirt. So there's a lot of stuff that has happened since Tinker, and that is happening right now.
It's just really amazing, all the things that are happening right now. Some are legal issues, and some are just, things that are going on without becoming court cases. Students in Maryland had a walkout to defend their classmate who had been picked up by ICE. Students are just speaking up about so many things. And then there are the cases, like you said, that case, the student wearing a shirt that said, there are only 2 genders. Of course, I thought that he should be able to wear that shirt. And it was wrong to censor that shirt. It should have led to dialogue among. Yes. And that's where I think wise principals can step in instead of censoring, can have a dialogue. Let's talk about it. Why don't the students who want to say that have that? Let's have whatever. But it also kind of weakened in a way that, it did weaken the Tinker ruling, of course, because they said something about how this could be disrupting to the school and lead to 6 schools, I think was the words that were used. Yeah. Not sure exactly what that means, but it kind of combined the 2 exceptions in the Tinker ruling, which was you cannot have substantial disruption of school. And by the way, it is supposed to be substantial disruption.
Right. Yeah.
Not just a little disagreement between two people. But anyway, substantial disruption in school or impinging on the rights of others, that second part that is too often forgotten. And it kind of combines them, saying that this is going to infringe on the rights of others and could cause sort of a psychological disruption in school, which makes for a sick school. So it kind of creates a new definition about it.
Right.
And I don't know what you all think about that. I'm sure you had a podcast about it, but
we haven't done an episode on
one. Okay.
No.
We need to, because I do have some opinions. And one of my opinions is I hate that this case makes me agree with Justice Alito, because Justice Alito dissented from the denial of cert. So Justice Alito and Justice Thomas would have actually taken this case up, obviously for different reasons. We've talked about Justice Thomas's eccentric views about student speech rights. But Alito would have taken it up because, he wanted to affirm that Tinker doesn't allow for viewpoint discrimination, which Mary Beth, you mentioned, like the government shouldn't be able to kind of pick and choose like which view or which side of an issue that should win or like should be, get a voice. And then, he also kind of wanted to clarify that material disruption standard, exactly what you were saying, kind of saying like when we say material disruption, we mean like it has to make it difficult for you to accomplish your mission, not that it makes like, not that it has these kind of like sick schools or like, what does that even mean? Does it make it so ambiguous that you can censor anything? And like Alito, to his credit, has been very supportive of student rights, free speech rights in schools. He wrote a concurrence in Morse v. Frederick that basically said, like, we are saying you can ban speech that reasonably promotes illegal drug use, and we are going no further than that. Right. So, like, he's been on student side in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think LM just kind of shows that like the meaning of Tinker has evolved in 30, 50, 60 years. Yeah. And like, we're always having these fights about like, okay, well, how far does Tinker go? And yes, it's great to say that students have these rights, but like, does that actually exist in practice? My question is always like, do students know about their rights? Mm-hmm.
Well, when it's a bad time for students' rights, which is now, it's also a bad time for teachers' rights. Mm-hmm. And we're certainly seeing that right now today. Alito has been kind of mixed in a way. I remember in 2013, the Supreme Court Historical Society had an event, and it was sponsored by the Liberty Institute. And they featured the Tinker case. And so, of course, my brother John and I went to it. And by the way, the other plaintiff in our case was a student named Chris Eckhart. Yeah. But John and I went to this event, and Alito was also hosting it. So I went up to him after the program, which was a very good program, and I said, Justice Alito, would you still vote for us if Tinker was in front of the Supreme Court? And he said, well, I guess I would, because I believe in students' rights. So I'm not sure what all that means, because at times especially in his lower court rulings, he hasn't always voted for students' rights. But I know he's kind of, I was sorry that the case, the two genders case, Liam, I think his name, was decided in the way that it was. I thought it was really a kind of a travesty, and he should have been allowed to wear that shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, with the LM case, it shows, or the two genders t-shirt case, because he wore that shirt and then he got censored. And so he wore a different shirt that said there are, and then it like had it crossed out. Yeah. And there was concerns about like at the school right now, because there was some like, I think there was some bullying of some LGBTQ students, and like there was, some deep concerns about kind of like the ideological, conflict here that was kind of playing out. And I completely understand. I don't want to, minimize that. Of course. But, it's an opportunity for conversation, and it's an opportunity for like generative kind of community building conversation across differences. And I see that as like, a core educational function of public education. And so like, I kind of agree, like without more, and I don't know all of the context, like without more, it's one of those things where it's like, you all missed a teachable moment.
Right.
I know. I think so too. And I think that, we have to be able to talk about these things in school, and LGBTQ issues are one of the most censored. The principal, I heard and read somewhere that he was concerned that he had been at another school where a student had killed himself, a gay student.
Right.
And that is a huge issue. Suicide among teenagers, and I was a gay teenager myself, so I understand. And my first girlfriend ended up killing herself, and I started speaking out about this issue some years later when I realized what a risk it was for teenagers for suicide just because they were gay. So I speak up about that as well, and I feel for the principal who felt that way, but I don't think censorship is the answer. That we have to be able to talk about these things, whether it's LGBTQ issues, and that is one of the most censored things. And of course, the opt-out case was relating to that. And I listened to your podcast, and it was very good. But also LGBTQ, I'd say race and racism, and then Palestine. I'd say those are the three most often censored, issues in K to 12. Right now, a student was just censored in Lower Merion, Pennsylvania for wanting to wear a keffiyeh at high school graduation. There's a student in New York. This is crazy. The student in New York, a different situation. The students were allowed to decorate their parking space any way they wanted. And so she decorated hers for pro-Palestine. And she was told, no, you can't do that. And I listened to the school board meeting online where they were discussing this. And the school board lawyer said, well, the standard for expression in schools today is neutrality. Mm-hmm. You have to be neutral. No student can say anything unless it's neutral. Well, that is a complete misreading of the law. And it reminds me also of a North Carolina teacher, ninth grade civics. I was going to speak at her class online, and ninth grade civics, she said, well, the school district has just adopted a new policy that we can't talk about any current events or politicians or any politics in our class. So it's ninth grade civics. I mean, that is so unfair to students.
Right. How do you talk about civics without connecting it to today?
Yeah,
right?
That's what I was wondering.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, these things are going on. So yes, you have these rulings.
Right. But then, it sounds like. Yeah.
Then you have to put them into action. And a student asked me yesterday, I was speaking to some students in Stony Brook, a high school event there that they were having. And the student said, well, how do we keep our rights? How do we stand up for our rights? I said, well, you have to use your rights.
Right. They're like muscles.
It's like muscles.
If you want to keep them, you got to use them.
If you're going to keep them, you have to know them. The teacher added, yes, and also know them. Know your rights and use your rights. And students, are scared to do that. And students ask me, how do I get over my fear of using my rights? Well, I had fear also through the years, in various speaking to groups, et cetera, et cetera. As you do it, it gets easier. And that's the same thing for using your rights. But it's so important, especially right now today.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, 100%. That's amazing.
100%. Wow. Yeah.
So, it sounds like you are keeping up on all of the different student speech issues. So, like, have you talked to any of the plaintiffs, or it sounds like you talk to students all the time? Like, is there other advice, or like, what would you say to those students today, or even educators, like who, I always go back to the words of Representative John Lewis about like making some noise and getting good trouble, necessary trouble. Like, what would you say to those students today?
Well, yeah, teachers have to be examples to students also that, you speak up about things too, or teach students about, what are your rights? And when they want to use them, then encourage them. And there's so many so many teachers that are being censored. I was speaking at a teachers conference in Virginia a couple weeks ago, and one of the teachers told me about the situation in Idaho, where a teacher put up a poster of hands of different colors.
Right. I heard
and
about
the poster
this,
said, all welcome here, all welcome here. And she was told she couldn't do that because of rules against diversity, equity, and inclusion. And people in the community then printed 16,000 copies of this poster for her, and it got to be a big deal. But the teachers knew about that, and they had heard about it, and it kind of went viral. And so I think, there's all of us adults and teachers too can be examples, and administrators. I've talked to, as I said, many administrators who are speaking up about the issues going on in their communities, whether it has to do with cuts to healthcare or, whatever, all the things that affect students, because there's so much more that affects education besides these free speech legal cases. But yeah, so being examples. And then as far as students, what advice? I say, whatever, find an issue that you care about. And there probably is already one that you do care about. And then, look around and find out what's going on with that issue. Find out what group is working on that issue. If you care about, let's say, immigration issues in ICE, which is huge, maybe a teen group called United We Stand. Or for environment, there's Sunrise. For, various issues that you care about, there's probably already a group that's working on that. Or maybe you have a club in your school that is a current events club or some group that cares about the issues in your community. You can make it very local. Some students care about, homeless people. Or Girl Scouts. They had a whole campaign because they found out that there was palm oil in their Girl Scout cookies. And it's not good for the environment or the orangutans.
Right.
And so we started a campaign about it.
There is no shortage of issues.
Yeah. So find an issue. And then it's a good way of life.
Yeah.
You meet people, and you should make it kind of fun. Sometimes, you can have a little fun with it because students are stressed and they get depressed and down. And I think we also have to keep them up, and we have to keep ourselves up. So I have this little coloring book that I've developed. It's kind of fun. It's Color My Rights, and it's got true examples of kids who are speaking up about all different things. Whether
that's so cool.
It might be around gun violence. It might be around disability rights. Some kids who are doing things and speaking up about things.
Is it available for purchase?
For free.
Oh, for
if
free.
If anybody wants to write to me at tinkertour@gmail.com.
All of this, it reminds us that it is as important as it has ever been to know your rights and to exercise them. As Chris said, it's it's a muscle, and we've got to work it. And if we want to make our schools and our lives better, more just, more fair, this is what we have to do. We've got to know our rights. And I think, Mary Beth, your story, your examples, your experience through the Tinker case and beyond is a perfect reminder of why all of this is so important. It reaffirms, at least to me, it reaffirms why I love studying this stuff, why I love talking about it, why Chris and I do this show. I mean, this couldn't have been a better conversation, I think, for our 50th episode. And so I just, on behalf of my partner, Chris, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your experience and all of these issues with us and speak to our listeners about students' rights and advocacy and the Tinker case and all of that stuff. We just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie and Chris. I appreciate you as well for teaching about all of these issues and for being journalists. You're combining these wonderful skills to help, teach people what it means to really be an educator and to respect young people in that process. So thank you so much. And I want to tell you, I read about an interesting case just today that was written by a journalist named Mark Walsh, and you might want to check out his articles because it's about a decision at the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals about teaching critical race theory And there are laws in 20-some states around that. And I know a lot of teachers are wondering what's the latest thing with that. So you might want to check out that. But yeah, I like to keep up on things. And you two are helping me do that. So thank you. Thank you so much for including me in your great work.
Well, you are an absolute inspiration. Yeah. So we appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You have inspired me. And my best wishes to young people and to teachers around the country and to any of your audience. I hope we can be in touch sometime. Write to me anytime.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I mean, I guess we have come to that point in the show where we always we do what we always do. Chris gives us our homework. So, Chris, what is our homework?
Well, I don't know if I can say it any better than Mary Beth did.
No.
Your homework is to embrace those small moments of courage and to stand up for what you believe in. This has been absolutely a pleasure. If you liked what you heard on this episode, please feel free to rate, review, subscribe to Chalk and Gavel. Your support means the world to us. And Mary Beth, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Best wishes.
Thanks.